My name is Marna Becker. I'm on the executive committee here of JBNF, the Jerusalem Business Networking Forum. We started, Joe probably gave some information at the beginning of the session, but for anyone who is new right now and has just come in, we're an organization, a nonprofit that helps, we're helping to basically work on the greater Jerusalem ecosystem. We're hoping to help businesses here, help with the promotion of jobs, helping out with basically creating Jerusalem and making it into a more vibrant business community that we see in other cities in the country. And also to help build up the community for younger people to settle here as well. Okay. In addition to my work with JBNF, where I'm a volunteer, I am a managing partner of a company called Secor Consulting. We help companies to find the right workers, and we help workers to find the right companies. So I'm a headhunter, and I'm also a career consultant. If you know anyone who needs those services, you can send them my way as well. Okay? So on the panel today, I'm going to introduce, and we want to thank everyone for coming out today and for presenting. I'm standing away from the podium because I do not like podiums. I find them to be very, unfriendly. Okay? First and foremost, we'd like to introduce Royale Schonbrun. He made Aliyah in 2002 from Queens, New York. He has an office in Tel Aviv and also an office here in Jerusalem on Rehov HaNevi'im.
Thank you very much. As you heard, my name is Royale Schonbrun. I made Aliyah in December of 2002. I have worked here in Israel for the last 12, 14 years in the field of U.S. taxation mostly for Israelis going to the U.S. and for work purposes, as well as, and mostly, people, Olim, and U.S. citizens living here in Israel. As many of you probably know, I know the ones who are just off the boat, who are just made Aliyah, maybe a little bit less, but certainly the ones who have been here for quite a while, realize that there are many, many differences that occurred as soon as you got off the boat when it comes to taxation. Both obviously on the fact that you have to now file Israeli tax returns in many situations, and also the fact that your U.S. tax filings have totally changed. Today's day and age, having an Israeli bank account means additional filing that you never would have heard about in the U.S. FBARs, FATCA, all these type of concepts that many, many people never even heard of or would have had to think about in the U.S. when they were living in the U.S. There's also many, many things that need to be dealt with when an Oleh comes to Israel, when a person comes to Israel to make Aliyah. There's a lot of planning that can be done to assist them in keeping their combined tax rates on a low side. It's not like it used to be. It's not like it used to be when a person was living in the United States and there was just one type of planning. Basically, okay, here I have U.S. federal tax. Depending where I lived, I had state taxation issues, and that's it. And you did whatever your accountant could do. Now when you come to Israel, there's a tremendous amount of planning necessary to make sure that you're not paying more than you should have to in two different countries with two totally different tax structures. That makes things very, very complex. So aside from the compliance side, one of the areas me and my partner, and I work as well with an Israeli, law team, that we come together, we try to put scenarios together to enable an Oleh, someone who just came to Israel, especially in situations where people may continue to keep their jobs in the United States, minimize their taxation, and obviously in both countries, and obviously to keep on the right side of the law in both countries. And this is something that's obviously very, very important. It's very, very important to new Olim. It's potentially even important to people who have been here and may have been changing their structure, or may not have even thought about it in the past and now say, oh, there's such an opportunity for me to potentially save money, and instead of paying 50 or 60% taxation on some type of income, and to do planning, this is what we're here for. And this is really what our specialty is. We do this as well, not only for people who work, we do this as well for investment planning. Obviously, when a person comes here and they want to invest, there's Israeli taxation, there's American taxation, all these things come together, and there are ways where we can work with your investment advisor to try to keep your tax in a very, very minimal, as well as giving you, following your investment advisor's advice to keep you safe. Obviously, with today's dollar shekel rates and the fluctuations, you want to make sure that your shekel is keeping up, or your dollars are keeping up to the shekel. And we work with the advisors, we work with you, whether your investments are in Israeli banks, whether your investments, and you have Israeli advisors, whether your investments are partially in US brokerage houses and you have a US broker here or brokers there. We work across the board with anybody and everybody, and our goal is to help to minimize the taxation in both countries, to keep you compliant in everything you need to do with the laws of both countries, and as well to help you profit and keep most of the money to yourself. If anybody wants to speak to me afterwards, I'm happy to talk to anybody.
Thank you very much, Royale. We appreciate it. I also want to add, before we continue on with the presentation, we're going to do a little bit of an audience survey to also help our speakers a little bit. In this room, if you made Aliyah in the last year, please raise your hand. Mazal tov, excellent, okay. If you made Aliyah within the last 5 years, please raise your hand. Okay, Mazal tov as well. And if you made Aliyah in the last 10 years, if you please raise your hand. Anybody who's been here longer than 10 years? Okay. We wanted to check to see kind of who's with us right now, because we recognize that this conference and the event going on outside is for specifically for Olim. So we want to make sure that we're catering to you. Also, something that's a bit different about this panel, we will be having a question and answer session. You'll have the microphone in the middle. So if you think of a question you want to ask, please keep that in mind. Okay. Our next speaker is Dave Wolf. He is from the law firm of Hacohen Wolf. He is from the Netherlands, from Holland. He is a U.S. and Israeli tax lawyer specializing in compliance. He is based here in Israel, in Tel Aviv, as well as in New York. He is also has an office as well. In New York as well, in Tel Aviv, and also in Jerusalem. He also is a consultant to a lawyer in China. So that is his claim to fame. I'm going to hand over the microphone, as I should say, to Dave Wolf.
Okay, so no presentation. We'll do it by heart. So I'm an American tax lawyer, and I specialize in compliance. That means that now that you made Aliyah, you are going to do business, and you open a bank account here in Israel. Well, in America, in 2010, they enacted a law called FATCA, F-A-T-C-A, which is a fantastic law for me as a lawyer. For most of my clients, it's kind of a headache and very problematic. The main issue of FATCA means that foreign banks have to report to the United States government of their American clients. And if they don't do that, they're going to be penalized of 30% of any payment that comes from America to that particular country. I can tell you, when I was faced with FATCA in 2010, many jurisdictions, many countries said, this is ridiculous, we're not going to participate, it's against our laws. Well, today over 100 countries have signed an agreement with America, and on June 30th, Israel as well signed a FATCA agreement. So what does that mean for you? Well, that means that the local banks are going to collect information. First of all, they're going to go through their paperwork and see if you're an American. Now, you made Aliyah last year. Okay, so you go into the bank, and with a little bit of Hebrew and an American accent, pretty easy to find out you're an American. On top of it, the bank is supposed to check all of the information that they have on file, including the opening documentation. Your Teudat Zehut, it says that you're born in America. So if you made Aliyah 15 years ago, or in 1994, like myself, if you're an American and you have a Teudat Zehut or an American passport, the bank is going to find out about it. Even if you only have a signatory authority, your local bank is supposed to take that information, collect it, and send a list by September next year to the Israeli tax authorities, who will then pass it on to the American tax authorities. Now that means that if you have never reported any of your accounts it's about time you start doing that. Because in today's world, you can no longer stay anonymous. And that brings me to the next part. You may not be from America. You may be from any other country. But FATCA, basically what happened is it took another step. And today, many organizations, whether it's the United Nations, whether it's the OECD, whether it's, there are currently 44 countries that under the auspices of the OECD have agreed to share information. And we're talking about 44 countries, so that you're going to do business here in Israel, and you're doing business in China, or you're doing business in Norway, there is a good chance that Norway and Israel will start sharing information. So what I want you to understand is that today, now that you made Aliyah, and now that you are being international, you need to take into consideration that information about your banking is going to flow freely, and you need to either become compliant or stay compliant.
Thank you very much. Okay, our next speaker will be Ilan Rubenstein. Ilan is the CEO of HomeNet, Israel HomeNet. He made Aliyah in 2000 from the United Kingdom. And he currently is living in Moshe Vedera with his wife and 5 kids. He is a licensed real estate agent for the last 20 years, and we're excited to have him speaking today. Ilan.
So yeah, I'm from the United Kingdom. My name's Ilan Rubenstein. My background's in commercial real estate, actually from there in investments. Having made Aliyah, I decided to take it upon myself to help other Jews home, and that's my memory hook, if you like, bringing Jews home. And basically what we've done is set up a boutique national network to enable people to get advice, whether they're buying new apartments or existing, whether they want to rent. Sorry? Okay, not to worry. So if anybody would like some tips, then they're available from the table afterwards for renting, buying new or buying existing. I'd like to just spell out a little bit, if I could be showing all my properties, but not that they were on the PowerPoint anyway, by giving a little bit of background into the Israeli market. Things are radically different to how they operate in the United States and in England and various other places. So don't assume anything is the same, from looking at properties to negotiating them to expectations about how much money you can borrow, although we have a bank representative here. So it's good to take advice from people who are independent. If not myself, then at least if you're speaking to a real estate agent, ask to see their license. We're licensed by the Ministry of Justice, and the law is there to protect you. So don't take any shortcuts there. If you're looking at a new project, bear in mind you're speaking to builders' representatives. They are salespeople, and their job is to sell you the apartment that they want to get rid of, not necessarily the one that's going to be good for you. So again, somebody who can advise you on best value, what's likely to hold its value, what would be more sellable 5 years down the line. It's worth having them do that, and if not, negotiate for you and probably saving you a packet there. Now there's, people talk about purchase groups. That's a whole subject. We could talk about that for an hour in its own right, but I'm just going to briefly touch on that. It's something that obviously can save people money because you're cutting out the developer's profit. The organizers normally take about 7-8% instead of the developers 20 to 30, so you can save money there. You really need to, again, check the credentials. Going back to builders, developers, I was asked by an Israeli client, not even an Oleh Chadash, whether she should go with a given builder, and she mentioned to me that he had offered her a discount if she paid the money into a different account, not the one nominated by the accompanying bank. I told her that this is how Hefziba went bust and went to jail. Obviously, they were in trouble beforehand. It's completely illegal, and you don't always know these things because you might assume that they're very reputable, nice, fancy brochure. It doesn't mean anything, apart from the fact that you may not have control over who's giving the builder, and certainly for an address afterwards, in terms of warranties, you're only going to have the actual kablan mevatzea, the actual builder that does the construction. People obviously make Aliyah and they're renting, and at some point my aim is to try and get them on the housing ladder. So if I can help make that happen, I think that will be part of strengthening Aliyah, making for a more stable environment for your family and kids. People looking to invest in real estate, it's obviously a high-performing asset. It's not just the income which beats the bank hands down, yields of around 3 to 4% on average, but also the scope of capital gain over the long term. I don't think anyone can point to any 10-year period in Israel's history and show somebody who lost property on a single residential investment. There are land opportunities for people that don't have enough money to buy an apartment. There are financing opportunities. If you're Israeli, you can borrow 75%. Again, good to talk to a mortgage broker or a banker about that. And then there's the subject of real estate investment trusts, where, again, you need to know who you're dealing with. We're involved in one in the residential arena in terms of helping Olim. And if anyone wants to discuss that with me, that would be great. Otherwise, I'll be pleased to give you advice to your friends and help them and hold their hand in the promised land. Ilan Rubenstein, real estate and business broker. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ilan. We appreciate you coming as well. I also have a great experience with Ilan as well through BNI Anglit. I had a chance to meet him, and really he does great work as well. Our next speaker is Mati Munk. Mati is originally from London, made Aliyah came from the UK in the 1990s. He is the head of the international department at Mercantile Bank. So I'd like to introduce Mati Munk.
Oh no, you're disappointed? I'm sorry. It's an Aliyah joke. It's an Aliyah joke. It's about a real good guy called Jacob. Jacob. I get to the microphone for the punchline. You don't have to hear the rest of it. He was a great guy, and he was given, unlike most of us, a chance at the age of 72 to go and visit heaven and hell. Check it out. See what it's all about. He goes into heaven, and it's everything heaven is meant to be. It's green pastures and peace and paradise. And he goes into hell, and it's one big party. And there's beer, and there's booze, and there's women, and there's music. So when he passes on at the age of 85, and he gets to the old proverbial pearly gates, and they said to him, well, Jacob, you've been a good guy. What do you want? You've been here before. You should know. He says, well, yeah, I was a good guy, and I deserve to go to heaven, but I'm such a good guy, I'm going to give up my spot. And I'll take hell, and I'll give it to somebody less worthy to go to heaven. And he walks into hell, and it's burning, and it's everything that we proverbially assume hell. He's like, where's the alcohol? Where's the booze? Where's the parties? He says, Yaakov, that's when you were a tourist. Now you're an Oleh Chadash. All right. No presentation. It's really difficult to give a talk when you had a presentation. There's no presentation. The topic of post Aliyah was rather generic, but since this is the Jerusalem business networking, I did decide to talk about something which a lot of Olim have an idea sometimes about setting up a business in Israel. Now, it's not something we can talk about in 7 minutes, but I'll try to give a few of the challenges on the tip of the iceberg, and I also try and make it a little bit interesting for somebody who it's never crossed their mind to set up a business in Israel, and you're probably much healthier for it. I'll give a few basic, try and manage to avoid some hurdles. Basic business skills we know about. You have to have a product, or you have to have a service. You have to know how to market. You generally have to know how to manage. Sometimes you need money. You have to foresee what's going on. But obviously, one of the greatest challenges in setting up businesses, one of the greatest skills in businesses is communications. Now, when we talk about communications, it's, okay, do you know how to communicate? Yeah, I know how to talk. I know how to tell people what to do, but that's not communicating. Communicating is all about saying something and making your message get across. Anybody here who has teenagers or has had teenagers knows exactly what the challenges of communications are all about. Within business, communications is really the heart of the matter because you're dealing with people all the time. And there comes the greatest challenge of all. How does one communicate between cultures? It's a completely different thing. We're not in the UK, we're not in America, we're not in Canada. How can we manage to set up a business and still manage to bridge that culture gap? So I think in order to maybe give a a couple of points in that, we have to understand what a culture is. The official definition, forget the official definition. Basically, a culture are messages, are images, or anything that we grow up with and we absorb from the society. And it could be it could be wherever you are, it could be a subculture, and that basically creates what we are. So that if I say the color red, people think it's danger because that's how we grew up, with the color red being danger or traffic lights saying stop. Different countries been different, and we had on the presentation, well, all right, we'll bury the presentation, but are there, let's say, anybody here from South America, before I offend you? Okay, because I can go like this, and all the Americans will say, what am I saying? A-okay. Are there any Russians here? What am I saying? I'm basically saying that you're as nothing. If there were Brazilians here, yeah, forget that. I mean, that's, on emails when they put exclamation marks and stuff, that's that. Cultures evolve. Cultures were not created. They come out of different methods of rules and leadership, monarchies, a lot of religious bases within cultures, inventions, McDonald's, sports, all these things create the messages we understand. And therefore, when we come to Israel, we see a different culture. And one of the major differences in culture is something called between high context and low context cultures. Low context cultures are where basically you have user manuals for everything, and they're so thick, and you go by the law of the book. High context cultures, less words, more hand talks and other sorts of hand talks. I think this is quite a popular one. Now, often we think when we come to Israel, and we think, okay, I come from America, I come from the UK, and everything is good, and in Israel they do everything all different and it's bad. It's not. It's just different. It's not that they are more beseder, that's just part of the culture. The culture comes from more relationship-based. And these are things that you have to understand, because when you do business in Israel, there are a few basic rules. One, you can't set up a business assuming that you're only going to work with Americans. A business is like a plant. If it's not growing, it's going to die. And you're limited if you only assume that you're going to have an American or UK market. You cannot change the Israelis. Don't assume you're going to force your culture on them. Talk to Starbucks, anybody who thought that could work. So, very different than we're used to in the UK, for example. A few do's and don'ts about doing business with Israelis. Israelis don't get small talk. They think it's something you do at the end of a business meeting. It's crazy. They're down to business, down to earth. Don't find that offensive. It's not offensive. It's just the way they are. It's a culture where everyone's family. There's no point doing small talk with family. That's also why sometimes people find them abrasive, because there's less need to be polite. They like sharing. They like bring something into the meeting. Personal space is an interesting phenomenon. I know somebody wanted to set up a squash center in Israel just because it was the only sport where if you actually interrupt somebody's personal space, it's a foul, it's your foul. They said Israelis have to learn personal space. So we're used to it. Don't get offended by these things and try and merge in. I'm being stopped here, and anyone, obviously, you can ask afterwards, that's fine. But you have to communicate, and it's worth learning about the Israeli culture in order to succeed. And understanding who you're doing business with in order to, make it work. Thanks.
Thank you, Matti. We appreciate it as well very much. Our next speaker, originally from the United Kingdom, from London, is Danny Newman. He is based in Ramat Beit Shemesh and is the branch manager for Goldfus Insurance in Beit Shemesh, and we thank him for him. He also recently returned, if it's okay for me to say, he returned from service in Gaza, and we really appreciate that as well.
got a PowerPoint from it, which is actually nice. So firstly, a bit about myself. Made Aliyah in 1999 from London. I used to work for Sun Life of Canada in the 1990s there. Post Aliyah, I also worked for a few years for the Jewish Agency, and about 8-9 years ago, went back into industry and worked for Goldfus Insurance. It was a very easy decision who to work for when wanting to go back into industry. Goldfus Insurance is one of the largest, if not the largest and oldest English-speaking agency in Israel, with 3 offices in Jerusalem as the main office, the head office, Bet Shemesh, or Ramat Bet Shemesh, and Modi'in. We're quite unique as an agency is concerned in the fact that our agents, and myself included, we work on salaries as opposed to commission-based, and we are not tied to one specific insurance company, so that we look out for our clients to make sure that we are selling products based on the client's needs as opposed to the remuneration that we ourselves will receive. To speak about insurance in Israel post-Aliyah in 5 minutes, bearing in mind that some people here are new off the boat, some are old-timers, and in between, and that insurance isn't really the most exciting of topics. I will do my best to try and give a very, very brief overview, which will touch on points, and I will try and change a bit from last year, because I see there's a few faces who were here last year as well. First and foremost, I'm going to try and plot in one graph a typical life of someone financially speaking. As you can see, the blue line is the income line. Hopefully it increases over time. Age 64, 67 is currently the pension age in Israel. And the big arrows are little things called children and the like, which may cost money. I know that, please God, in 9 years' time, my 4-year-old son, please God, will have a bar mitzvah. I know that will be a big expense. For many people, that real line, the income line, is beneath 0. And then you suddenly hit retirement age and it goes down to state pension. So what are the things that one can look for, whether or not you're a new Oleh or an old-time Oleh, how one can look after your own financial lifestyle? Sorry. The first thing is what I would call a long-term fund. It's to create a pot of money, for want of better words, a pension-type scheme, whereby at retirement age you turn on the tap and build up the reservoir to make sure there's enough money for the risk of living too long. Obviously, the larger the long-term fund, the higher the pension money one will get on a monthly basis. The smaller the fund, the lower the pension. The earlier one starts saving, the likelihood of it being a larger fund is bigger. Second thing we look at is what we're called a short-term fund. These can be savings in various places. Most people tend to throw their money away by sticking it in banks. Sorry, Matti. But there are alternatives there as well within the bank industry where you can get better returns. But to stick in a regular pakam, a short-term savings scheme where you get next to no interest, there are alternatives to investment houses. Insurance companies these days have options which don't, whilst not guaranteeing returns, have historically far outperformed the regular publicised investment schemes, although banks do have other things out there if you ask them. And the final thing are the protections. The protections will be things like car insurance, okay, car insurance, home insurance, savings, health insurance, life insurance, and everything in between. Things to be aware of as useful tips for Olim, and there's a few here. It's available on our website as well, but a few things which I'll mention for the new Olim. First, or old Olim, if you have a life insurance policy, it's one of the things down here, but due to time constraints, I shan't go through everything. If you have a life insurance policy overseas, make sure you have in writing that it will cover you here now that you are no longer domiciled in your original place where you took out the policy. I have a story of a married couple who both had life insurance policies. They took out the policy together at the same time. The wife's insurance policy covered her in Israel. The husband's didn't. It's futile paying a policy overseas if it's not going to pay out that you're now living here. Car insurance is an example, to make sure that if you have a no claims letter from overseas, to bring it so that you can qualify for maximum no claims bonus here as well. And there are other things which I won't go through for time constraints, but our website has this there as well. Very, very briefly, one thing which I'll touch on, one quick thing I may go a few seconds over, is something called the subrogation clause. If people are renting a property, whether they're the landlord or the tenant, there's something which many contract lawyers aren't familiar with. And this is something called the subrogation clause. 2 very quick scenarios. Scenario number 1, someone lights Shabbat candles and they go out to friends and the Shabbat candles fall over and they burn the place down. If they are the renter, their own contents insurance will cover them for damage caused to their property. The landlord's insurance company will cover them for damage. However, their insurance company can turn around and sue the tenant for whatever they've had to pay out. Likewise, if there's a problem with electricity in the apartment and the landlord fails to fix it or sends around a cowboy friend of his who's not a qualified electrician to fix it, again, both insurance companies can pay out, and the other insurance company can sue the side that's negligent. There is a clause that costs no money, which can be added into the contracts and into the insurance policies, called cancellation of the subrogation clause. In Hebrew, bitul sif shibuv. It costs nothing to add, simply people aren't aware of it, and it means that both insurance companies still pay out, but they forego the option to sue the other side if they are negligent. Just to sum up, insurance is a very, very complex thing, purely simply because there are many different types of policies. Don't assume that the same policy with one insurance company is exactly the same as the other. With life insurance, it's black and white as far as claims are. You construct it in different ways, but you're either dead or alive. With car insurance, you've got black and white and many shades of grey in between. Don't assume just because you're paying something at one price with the same company, X, and your neighbour's paying Y, don't assume that you've got exactly the same company, the same type of policy. It is very, very important to understand and to know what you've got. And just in one last thing, there are a number of decent agents out there, but the important thing is to find an English-speaking agent, if you can, who will help you assist you make the right decisions, give you all the information so that you can make an informed decision based on your needs. We can do things in English as well, and we have policies available, home policies in English, car in English, investments in English. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you very much, Danny. I appreciate that as well. Again, moving right along with our final speaker for this session, I would like to introduce Josie Arbel. Josie is the Director of Klita, or Absorption Services, at the AACI. She made Aliyah from Toronto in 1983, and we are very honored to have her on her second panel for today. So, Josie.
Okay, those of you who were here in the morning, I was glad I was first. Today, I'm very glad I'm last. Because, and again, you're at all different stages before or after your Aliyah. Banking, insurance, real estate, driving, taxes, my obligations to my country of origin. Those are our daily, that's a day at AACI, where as the Aliyah Association, founded in 1951, we take those questions and we believe that what people need whenever they need it is accurate information. What's the rule? What's this FATCA? What's the insurance policy? How do I change my driver's license? How do I register my child's birth? All of those things that we need to do in life, that if we were living where we grew up, some of it we would already know. And when you're in Oleh, you have to do it all at once, and you suddenly are struck with more bureaucracy than you're used to handling. Israeli bureaucracy is not a big, bad, scary animal. It's like anywhere. There's rules, and if you know and you bring the picture that's the right size, then you don't have to come back the next day. So from the point of view of having been giving information and advice to Olim for many, many years, and thanks to all of the panel for what they've illuminated in their own profession, my advice to every one of you, wherever you are in the spectrum, is to say, what do I need to know? What do I want to do? What do I want to accomplish? What do I need to know to get it done? And then go find out, gather the information, and then you can go do it. So AACI as a resource is available to be part of your finding things out so you can succeed however you view success. Today we are here, both an employment counselor in the employment room and over not far from the transfer spot between the employment room and the main room. We have our information Aliyah Klita counselor there today. We run a hotline every day from 12:15 to 1:15 where you can reach an ACI counselor by phone in the Jerusalem office, 02-566-1181. We are also a membership organization and invite members, and I see a lot of familiar faces. Some of you are already our members, where we offer you the full range of services, both the information and advice side, which is most relevant to this topic, but also the social and cultural center for all English speakers to be that warm home in Jerusalem, to help Jerusalem grow and flourish. Thank you.